Welcome. Thank you everybody again for coming to San Diego Laravel User Meetup.
Thank you.
I am Tom Righthead. I go by PFY on RSC channels and all the other gaming things that I like to do.
And I'm Eric Van Johnson. I'm Chocom on Twitter and just about anywhere else. We got a couple news faces, right? You guys are new, right? Hey, what brought you guys out today?
Checking out the Laravel Meetup.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Not here to serve any warrants or anything?
Nope.
Okay, we're good. Then, yeah, I'm really Eric Van Johnson, yeah. We got a couple upcoming meetups. SDPHP, who's kind of our sister group, they are, what? You got something to say? No? You good? Okay. Their next meetup will be downtown. They go from downtown to North County every other month. Next one's downtown. It's going to be at Open San Diego, which don't know a lot about. I've been seeing their meetups, so I'm kind of interested about what they're going to talk about. They're about bringing open government, sort of, I guess, to get people more involved with government through open source solutions. And I know that this talk is going to be a lot about how the city of San Diego is using open data, things like that. So I'm really curious to see what they do.
And then we've got our next meetup, again, a month from now. We do not have a topic yet. It could be services, because spoiler alert, services isn't actually going to show up today. But we do have a Trello board. If you have something that you want
That's coming up. Trello board's coming up.
Is the next slide?
No, but we can make the next slide next time. A couple ways to get in touch with us or to stay current on what's going on is we have an IRC channel. Everybody hangs out in SDPHP because that's just where everybody was. We do have a Twitter handle. I try to tweet every now and then. Not a whole lot going on there. Meetup, obviously. And we are working on a website, sdlug.com. If you want to contribute to that, or if you want to help out with any of these streams, let me know. I'd be interested to talk with you. Want to talk about Trello board?
If there's something that you want to talk about yourself, or if you want to hear talked about, we have a Trello board. Our Trello board allows you to upvote items that you want to see discussions about or presentations about. If you want to present something yourself, you don't have to be an expert. All you have to do is be able to stand in front of people and talk about it. It's just getting everyone acquainted with what it is you've learned, what it is you know. You can add yourself as a member to the board, and we'll get notified of it and see that you want to do a presentation, or when we're scheduling presentations, we'll see what people are interested in.
And it doesn't have to be on this board. If you have an idea for a presentation, even if it's like a soft talk, just let us know, and we'll get you on the board. We'll try to do 2 presentations a meetup, so it doesn't have to be super long. You'll see my presentation shouldn't take that long at all, and yeah, pretty straightforward. Is that it?
Our sponsors, love to thank CARI.net for having us here. CARI.net, you've got the plug.
Yeah, so CARI.net will service travel. We have a few data centers here, and if you have any hosting needs, you can deal with it at all. Basic shared hosting or whole cluster ensembles, whatever you need, custom, we'll do it.
Tours still on the table?
What's that?
Tours still on the table?
Yeah, if anybody wants to tour the facilities, give them afterwards. Just like to have them close to the cheese.
Who would come without closed-toe shoes?
Yeah.
That would be crazy. And also, the Diego Dev Group, CARI.net, thank you for providing the pizza. Diego Dev Group providing the sodas and...
And obviously, CARI.net is the facility where you're at.
Facility.
They're doing the streaming as well, so we appreciate
there.
it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's cool. So again, thank you to CARI.net and Diego Dev for helping us, allowing us to get this together and up and running.
Cool. All right. That's it.
According to our meetup board, we were doing discussions on Carbon and the new authorization services in Laravel 5.1.11. And services, authorizations turns out to be running longer than we thought, so services is going to be on the board for some time in the future. If you really want to see the services talk, hit the Trello board.
Yes.
No.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
And then any general topics you guys want to talk about, we can blast through the presentations and talk later, or whatever. It's no big deal. Want to fire this off?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So we already did all this. You guys know who I am, where I'm at. We're going to talk about carbon. No problem. Feel free to interrupt me anytime. A very open meeting for the new people. I think Thomas and I both have a similar style. We bullshit a lot, so if you got questions, feel free to ask them. If you like it. All right, Carbon is a simple API extension for date time. So I have to prefix this with something, okay? A pet peeve of mine. What we're talking about here, Carbon, which is just a package in PHP, it's taking advantage of existing PHP methods and functions. So there's no magic there. There's nothing C compiled to extend PHP. So before you ask, yes, everything you do in Carbon, you can do with native PHP stuff. It's nothing different. The whole premise behind Carbon and a lot of these packages is it just makes it easier. We've had this discussion before, trust me. Carbon's baked into the Laravel framework. All you have to do to use it is use Carbon at the top of your class. It's not a Laravel only package. You can install it in any package or any Laravel PHP project. Composer require Nesboot Carbon. So I love Carbon. I really do. It is by far one of my favorite packages. We all as developers have to work with date and times, and it's a nightmare. It's always a nightmare. You're having to parse them, you're having to figure things out. Carbon just immensely just simplifies this. So in order to create a Carbon object, it's about as straightforward as it can be. Carbon now gives you the current date time. Carbon today will give you the current date. Carbon yesterday, guess what that does? Yesterday's date, that's right. You can do Carbon create from date, where you give it a date and it creates the Carbon object for you. Really, that's simple. This bottom one is pretty common, where you'll pull a record or something from a database that might have a date time in there. And I use this one probably way too much. Carbon parse, where you just give Carbon what you think is a date time and let it figure it out, right? Works fantastic. I've never had a problem with this. It's great. Just great. Love this package. I don't think I could ever go back to not using it. What you get, as I said, is an object. So, see over here, we define birth date. Yes, that's my actual birth date, whatever. If I dump and die birth date, you see, it gives me back the date. I didn't pass the time, so it assumed the time when I ran the query. But what's also interesting is it gives you a time zone. By default, because I didn't define time zone, it's going to assume the time zone of the server, which makes perfect sense, right? So how do we fix that? Oh, very simple. When you create your object, you pass a time zone. So here we do West Coast. We tell it America, Los Angeles. We give it its date. Boom, we get that time zone. We say Hawaii, and boom, time zone. Fantastic, right? So what does that give us now? Well, now we can compare these two with very little effort. If I just echo West, which remember, this is a Carbon object at this point, say diff in hours, Hawaii, which is another Carbon object, it understands, even though the times were the same when I created them, it understands the different time zones and gives me back the number 3. This is good, right? Not fantastic, because, let's say I was coding for somewhere across the world. I didn't know if 3 was ahead or 3 was behind. I wasn't really sure what the 3 was, so I'd need to figure out what that is, or would I? No, I wouldn't, because Carbon has something called diff for humans, in which it will tell you 3 hours before. So that's all you have to pass. Object, diff for humans, object, and it pretty much literally spells it out for you. Couldn't be easier. So obviously, Carbon's good at looking forward. We create an object, and then I say, Echo next meetup the object, add weeks 4, so add 4 weeks to it. So if we look back here, we had set it to today's date, and when I say echo meetup add 4 weeks, it adds 4 weeks for us. There's a problem with this that you need to be aware of. When we do this, we're modifying that object. So again, we come over here, we set that object to today's date, we dump and die, we see it's today's date, Los Angeles. We do our add 4 weeks, it adds 4 weeks, we dump and die again, and you see that's now part of the object, which is not necessarily always the result you want. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can create multiple objects here that would seem pretty intuitive, but fortunately you don't. There's a function called copy object. So again, set today's date, and then we simply echo today's meetup is meetup, next month's meetup is meetup, copy, add 4 weeks. And you see it spells it out for us, nice and simple. If we dump and die the original meetup, we're still set correctly. Boom, boom, boom. So since I wasn't going to reuse this anywhere, I didn't need to assign it to another variable, but I could have. But the meetup copy just does exactly what it says. I mean, you can talk it out. It makes a copy of the object and does whatever function you want to it. So, like I said, we could have assigned that to another next meetup variable if we wanted to, but we didn't need to. We talked about human readable earlier, and that pretty much applies across the board. Just about any sort of diff that you're doing, you can make it human readable. You know, add 1 year from now, 4 weeks from now, end of month, right? So, I mean, it's like, okay, from today's date to the end of the month, it says 1 week from now. And then end of century, 84 years from now. I mean, really simple. It doesn't get any easier than that. Let's see. Much like looking forward, pretty much everything you do forward, you can do backwards in Carbon. The only difference is you use sub-weeks. So subtract weeks, subtract months, subtract year, whatever. It's all the same. Pretty intuitive once you start to use it on what you need to do. And what's funny is, and I catch myself doing this all the time. Matter of fact, that's how I found copy. I'm sitting there, I'm like, gosh, I love Carbon, I love doing this. Man, it seems like there'd be an easier way of doing this part. And sure enough, I do a quick search through the code. I'm like, hey, what's this copy right here? Yeah, that's exactly what I wish I would have done. Nth of month. I love this function. I do. So again, first meetup of the year, you just define year. January 1st, 2016. And I want to say the first San Diego Laravel user group meeting in 2016 will be on first meetup, nth of month, 4/3. And what that represents is the 4th week of the 3rd day, which, hi, welcome. 3rd day, which in Carbon speak is Wednesday, and it kicks out a date for you. I mean, I don't have to do any math in my head, nothing. I just give me the 4th week, Wednesday. Another real strong thing it has is formatting. So you have your object, your Carbon object, and you're constantly wanting different formats of it. It's just one command. To date string will give you the date. To time string will give you the time. To formatted date string gives you a nice pretty date. You can even customize so that this is all standard PHP stuff. You just customize the format and it spits it out for you. Really simple, simple, simple. Where I stopped doing things in Tinker and started just copying from the website. I started looking at all this stuff like, oh man, this is straight from the website. Some of the real common formats is, you can go to Atom string, you can do RSS string, W3, C string. I mean, just about everything you can do. This is, if you're trying to put something in the header, there's a cookie string right there, cookie string in there. It's awesome. Awesome. Other fun stuff you can do. And these can all be comparisons. So you get your date time, and you say, is date time is the day, which I actually have used a lot. You're trying to figure out if the date something is supposed to happen is that day, and that tells you, is it tomorrow? Is it in the future? Is it in the past? Is it on a leap year? Is it a weekday, weekend? You just spell it out. There's even a function in here that allows you to pass to, where you'd have your date time and then another variable come in, and the second variable is like birthday. You just say, is it a birthday? So if you have like user profiles, then you can have a check every time the user logs in to see if that day is that user's birthday. It's kind of like what Facebook does. And that might be it. That's really it. I told you it was a short one. Any questions? Comments? Complaints? No complaints. What's up?
So, kind of like I was saying about the whole thing, there's actually a calculated property for age in the pool. By passing in that birthday timestamp, you can do a wage, and it will tell you how old that person is.
Oh, yeah, I think I saw that one too, yeah.
That was really cool.
But there's just so many of these cool little carbon functions that we all will look at and say, oh yeah, that's cute. I don't know if I'll ever use it. And then like 3 months later, you'll be like, wait a minute, I saw a function for that. Why am I doing all this math? Yeah. Even simple things. The one I find myself using a lot is start of day, end of day. So you get a record from a database, for example, and you say, okay, say it's a comment. And you say, all right, I want all comments that were posted on this day. So you get the timestamp from that comment, and you say start of day, end of day, and it gives you a time range of that entire day for you. It's awesome. Did you have something else? Sorry.
It's called an interoperable with daytime.
What's that?
It's called an interoperable with daytime.
It's an extension of daytime, so I don't see why it wouldn't be.
So one of the really cool things about Coleman is it can take any existing daytime object and wrap it so that if you have something that needs you back in a daytime object, you can then put it into a Coleman object really easily. You can also hash Coleman objects to anything that expects a daytime because it extends from daytime.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because they had a lot of examples in there where they were doing daytime objects. I'm like, why are they doing that when they're using Carbon anyways? I understand why they're doing that now. I never thought of what they were trying to show there. So, and the documentation for Carbon is fantastic. He has, I think, just like a single web page of a ton of the functions that you can just kind of go through. It's really easy reading.
Yeah. There's one other thing I wanted to point out. It was on one of your first slides, and it was when you were doing the app user find.
Huh? User find.
Yeah. So it was the very bottom.
My database query?
Yep.
Yeah? What did I do wrong there?
Made it too complicated.
You did. So, assuming you're using Laravel and you're using Eloquent here,
Yes?
CARI.net is already a Coleman object.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's true, right?
So,
But it's a timestamp from the database as well. That's what I was trying to show.
But Eloquent by default will turn any requests for the CARI.net and updated fields into Coleman objects, and that's controlled by the timestamps property on the Eloquent model.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
you can add additional columns to that. So if you have like a deleted add, if you have
So if I do a dump die on that, I would see my Carbon object stuff
yeah.
like this right here. I would see all that.
Yeah.
Huh, I have to check that out.
Automatically doing that.
Okay, so forget Eloquent and all this. Just imagine this is just a timestamp from a database. Jesus, William.
Does I know it does a daytime, does it deal with date intervals at all? Like does Carbon have sections for date intervals? Well, like so you create a date interval object, every 7th Wednesday or something, and then you can use that to then iterate over and create an array of dates for the next 3 years. It's every 7th Wednesday.
You're saying yes?
Yeah, it does have extensions for that. It also has extensions for timestamps. So what actually happens, you can take two Coleman objects and you can actually use the history operand. So you can do date plus other date. And what it does is actually will that one it will give you a just a few date like that. But some of them will give you
You loop over? Do you loop over it the same way you loop over a collection?
Yeah.
Yeah, same way. Huh.
So you can create a date interval object from Carbon. There's a couple different methods for that, and then you can basically do full timestamping, full Carbon or whatever you want to call it in interval,
Yeah.
and get back your Carbon object.
Cool. Yeah, I strongly recommend it, especially if you work a lot with date time. Take a look at this package, even if you're not on a Laravel. It's just the guy's done a fantastic job. It's hands down one of my favorite packages out there. Hold on, I think Marcus had a question. I've been.
Oh no, I was going to say I wish I knew about copy before.
Trust me, so do I. I done it the other way where I would just create the object multiple times. Yeah. You?
Yeah. Do you know parse is pretty much just the parse method? Is it just string to time, or does it do anything more than that? Is it better?
I don't know. Do you know if that's just string to time?
It's basically string to time. They do a couple. They try to add some extensions onto it for very specific formats that string to time doesn't like default support. That are a little bit more individual. Like I know you can do things like the second Tuesday of next month,
Yeah.
and you can do things like that, and it'll actually figure it out. And
Yeah.
also-
PHP does a little bit of that, but it seems like if you like kind of chain a few of those
The
together,
date time thing
it's
does.
like
Yeah.
you can do like the second Thursday, but not the second Thursday of next year.
Yeah,
in
it
February,
tries to
yeah.
like resolve pulse and those, and it fills it out.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
You go fair enough.
It's pretty cool.
One thing that Pulse does do very nicely too is if you are passing in a timestamp that has a time zone identifier in it, it will respect that.
Yeah.
It will
Okay.
I abuse the parser. I just abuse it. I mean, and it's never failed me. So I should probably have a better idea how it works because I depend on it so much. But I just throw stuff in there. I'm like, oh, let's see if this works, and it always works. You got something?
Can you go back one slide?
Uh-huh.
Just, 2 more slides.
One more?
So there's one thing that got sort of brushed over, which is that here you see the formatting is outputting a string. But one of the things Carbon will do is if you're just calling the Carbon object, if you just echo the Carbon object, it'll call the default toString method.
That's actually a good point. Yes.
Yeah. So if you echo a Carbon object, it doesn't look like a Carbon object.
Yeah, let me show you what he's talking about because that's actually a really good point to make. I think I may have this still open here.
And while you do that, also, in my implementation, we store our user model, which has birthday information or whatever on it. We store the time zone for that user with them, and so when we call information from that user model, the time zone's automatically attached to it. And then in Carbon, you can use the TZ method to attach a different time zone to an existing Carbon object, and it will tell you what that time would be in that time zone as well.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is a really, really handy for doing scheduling stuff over multiple
Time
times.
zones,
If you're scheduling people's phone calls and meeting times, it's really nice to be able to just say TZ and the time zone that they're in, and now you've got their time zone appropriate for that time.
So this is what Thomas is talking about. If we dump and die this Meetup object, we get the Carbon object, right? That's the Carbon object. Can everybody see that? But if I just echo out Meetup, and again, remember this is an object, right? It just gives you the timestamp. So now this can actually be a little confusing too if you don't understand that that's actually doing some logic there. But yeah, it's nice. It's real nice to have.
How does it do that under the hood?
Using PHP's toString,
But-
that's one of the magic methods in PHP. You can put on any object, and you can echo any object that defines a toString method.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, if you're calling a method that requires a specific type, like echo or print, then it will check for a method on that object called _toString before it tries to do the auto type hinting. So if it does find that method on the object, then it will call that method instead of auto type hinting. If it doesn't, then it will try to type hint it by force.
This
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways of thinking of that. I'm kind of a UTC guy because it's kind of like a standardized, place and time, and then you convert based on user preference. I don't know. Does anybody else have any other approach they like to?
Yeah, if your business is a local sign shop, then I do it in local time. If your business is internet or in any way cross country, cross border.
If it's
stores-
online, isn't it internet by definition?
No, if you're catering to a local audience, I would store times locally just to reduce overhead for having to deal with it later on. But beyond that, if you start having different data centers where dates are different on different things, then UTC.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I worked for an enterprise company that insisted on setting their servers to the time zone the server was in. And we had servers here in California, in New York, in Europe, all over the world. And when, I forget how long ago, like 5 or 6 years ago, they decided to change, what did they change?
They changed the dates of.
Oh, when the clock changes, yeah. What day the leap ahead and back changes threw everything off, and because we weren't standardized on it one time, everything just went wonky on us. I mean, just in general, it was a nightmare to deal with because you get data from a server and you'd have to know where that server was to understand the timestamp if that was important to you. So.
I thought 5.6 or 5.7 was going to add time zone support to the daytime.
I believe it did. Yeah, yeah.
So I mean,
It's in there.
Yeah, so in that case, well, it used to be, at least in 5.5, you would just, you start to go to the time zone the server was.
Or the database, yeah.
The database.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
Well, we use Postgres now, so I'm not as up to date on the SQL, but like in Postgres, you can just say, here's the time, for this specific record, here's the time zone. And the time zone, so you can have, all your records, you can put whatever time zone you want on the individual record, and you can convert them out later or whatever you want. I think you can say you got my SQL too, like,
MySQL stores it as log, so it doesn't have additional.
so it doesn't have a lot of.
It's not available to you when you pull it.
There's also MySQL, like the default files will also be UTC. It will store everything on UTC that it receives, or it'll assume everything that it receives is UTC and store it that way. And any functions that generate a timestamp with it will return UTC multiple times.
Yeah.
You can override that, however. So I think it always depends on the storage medium, but the safest bet is to assume UTC and let your application switch to use those time zones.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a fan of
I
that.
think that's the most portable of them. The real fun one is when you have a solver that thinks it's in a database that it stores all the stuff in UTC, and then you do a migration of that database to another solver which has its MySQL configuration file storing it as TSV or something like that. When it phones up, it's all those times are now 3 hours off. That's it. The data didn't change. The timestamps are still exactly the same.
Right.
It's just the solver time itself changed. So it means everything is off now.
Cool.
Looks like Eric's over it.
I'm gonna start presenting your stuff here. All right. So if there are no more questions, I do want to get moving on. I kept saying I was going to hold myself to a half hour, and I'm already over a half hour. So we're going to take a little break between myself and Thomas. If you guys want to take a bio break or grab something to eat, there's also sodas in the fridge. Help yourself, and we'll go ahead and kick Thomas off here in about 5 minutes. If you want to smoke, you have 5 minutes.
Also, you won't run out half an hour. You just start late.
That's right. Yeah, I did about 30 minutes. Probably shorter. I think a lot of questions.
Well, this was all my ideas. Is that what you said?
Yes.
To pay for Slack Pro. Yeah, it goes all the way back.
He said it being like he's included in it.
So welcome to this.
he met with Mike on that. Yeah. Yeah, but then there's legal issues with that. All right, who's ready?
Do this.
Woo! All right, so today we're going to be talking about authorization in Laravel. And of course, the first most important thing to understand is what is the difference between authentication and authorization. So the authentication package that's been in Laravel for a long time now, fundamentally username and password based, or OAuth key, stores your access into the session, and in most cases that I've used, it's all handled by middleware in your routes. Your route just says this is a member page, this is not a member page, this is an admin page, this is not an admin page. Authorization is handles things like users and groups. Authorizations are evaluated per call based off of a rule set that you define. It's used in conjunction with authentication, so you're authorizing the actions of a specific logged-in user against some behavior, and it simply allows or denies access or visibility. So the first step is applying an ability with gate. Gate is the Laravel facade or object for handling whether or not someone is allowed through the gate.
Did you specify this is the new release, right? This is all new stuff.
Yeah, this is all in 5.1.11. The current version we're at now is 5.1.14, or 14, I guess, because it's December. So the first thing we're going to look at is one of the new objects that already exists in a new install of 5.1.1, which is the auth service provider. So by default, this is here. This is what it looks like. This is literally just doing a composer install of Laravel and then looking at the file. So what we're going to do is in the boot method of this object, we're going to add a gate definition. So we simply say, take that gate contract, define blog.post.update, and then we've got a closure here. Closure is going to say, take the user and the post, make sure that the user ID equals the post user ID. In this case, the post user ID being the person who created the post. Now, in this case, in any case, with authorization, you're either returning a true or a false. Anything else is just going to be evaluated straight through the loose typing that PHP uses. But it's expecting either yes you can, no you can't. You can do any number of things in here. You can call the database, look up what groups that user's in, look up what permissions that group has, and combine them with other groups that have other permissions, and do exclusive ors and whatever you want to, but we're going to do the simple cases here. So we've named a rule, blog post update, and we're asking it, is the user who's logged in the same as the user who created the post? You'll notice here, yeah, I've got the post, but where is the user coming from? I'm sorry, that's the next slide. We'll go to the next slide. Checking abilities with gate. One last mention. If the user's not logged in, this will return false. Whenever you call a defined rule and the user is null, it's an immediate bounce to false. So now that we've got our rule, let's check the rule with the gate facade. So this is my really, really simple, dumb example of posting an update to a blog entry. We're just taking what they requested, sending it to our model or our repository pattern, whatever, and saying, update the post. We want to add security to this. So right before we do our update, we say, if gate denies blog post update post. So this is the name of our rule, and this is the post that we're viewing. For this example, I'm not passing in post IDs. I'm just passing the post model straight into my method. Make sense? So the question here is, well, I'm not passing the user in anywhere. Where's the user coming from? That the user, like I said, is tied to the authorization authentication. So the user is just part of the facade. You're not going to be passing in which user you want to authorize. It's just saying you're probably talking about the user who's logged in. There are ways to override it as another user if you're testing out someone else's account or other things like that, but for the time being, we don't need to worry about that. So in this case, we're saying, well, if the rule returns false, if it denies the user access, just dump the script, give them a 403 page. If it doesn't, do nothing, continue on, let them do whatever they want to. It kind of seems counterintuitive to say if gate denies instead of if it allows them, but doing this allows us to have a much more concise if statement here. If we said gate allows, which is a functional method, then we would have to have our if statement surrounding all of the work that's going to be done in this method. It's just easier to dump out immediately if something isn't right. But 403 pages are ugly. We don't want users to see 403 pages, which is 2 slides from now. There is an alternate way of doing this. So the user model, as part of Laravel's default installation, is authorizable and authenticatable. These implementations and traits mean that we can just query the user model directly and say, does this user model that we've pulled in from somewhere have permission? So if we were to do that, we would just change that request to say, this request user cannot update the post. It does the same exact thing, a little more roundabout way. This is allowing you to access any user model that you want to. If you want to look up a user model and see if they have permissions, this will let you do that. Otherwise, exactly the same. But, like I said, 403s are ugly and we don't want people to see them. So let's take this partial that we've got right here. This is going to show up below every post that we've got. It gives them links to edit the post, delete the post, or comment on the post. But if they don't have permission to edit, delete, or comment, then we don't want to show those buttons at all, because those buttons are just links to 403 pages for them. So fortunately, we have the new can and cannot helpers in our Blade templates. So we simply say can, and then the name of our rule, and that it will infer the logged in user, or if there's no logged in user, automatically returns false. And if it matches, if the user can do that, show that line. If the user can delete, show the delete link. If the user can comment, show the delete comment, or show the add comment. If you want to have, yes?
How are you passing in the post ID with this approach? Or is it just inferring it by where you're at?
That's a super good question.
My question too.
Yeah. It'll make more sense when you understand that the further along this we go in the presentation, the more and more magic is being done. And it literally ends with just magic being done. So all of these implementations, it's good to understand what's going on.
And
Never use them.
When you're in the controller, you pass the post ID.
If you're in the controller, if you're rendering a view, then you'll pass the post through that, and it should infer it in some way. It's possible I missed that part. I've never actually done this. If you're using form requests, which I don't use, so I could just totally not understand what's happening here. In your form request, you can also pull up the gate facade, say, hey, I'm doing this update on this model. Is it going to work or not? Your form request does its form request thing. Again, returns true or false, does the thing or doesn't do the thing. Should have taken that slide out, just generally.
I like that slide. It shows me something I didn't know. I didn't know about phone requests.
Yeah, me neither. Form requests being another 5.11 thing, which, since I've never,
I have to read it up.
yeah, there's more to learn about. So this is how, for the can thing, because you're using a form request. So this slide I'm already, I'm sorry about, because this one is where the magic stuff starts to happen. Probably going to go over this whole slide twice just because it's a little tough the first time. So policies are the real powerhouse behind authorization. A policy is a class that you're going to tie to something and say this class belongs to this other thing. So we're going to start off by making a blank policy. This is just artisan make policy, pass it a name. We're going to call this one our post policy. This is going to deal with everything related to blog posts. So this is completely blank, what you get when you say make a new policy. Now we're going to hop into the auth service provider, which by default looks just like this, and has a default policy for all models automatically loaded. We're just going to drop in our new policy. So what we're going to say here is, for my post model, I want to attach the post policy that I just made, this thing. Follow? So now, I go back into my policy and I make a new method called update. And I give it the exact same thing I had before when I was writing my policies into the auth service provider. Instead of in service provider, I'm writing them into my policy file. Simply compare the user being passed in with the post user ID being passed in. So now I've got this update rule bound to my post model. And with that, I can now drop most of the wording that I'm using to specify my policy. So I used to say here, blog.post.update, because I was specifying this rule is specific to blog posts, and you're updating that blog post. Well, now I'm passing in a post model. Since I'm passing in a post model, the policy is being loaded into the model, and I'm saying update. And the post model is saying, hey, do I have a policy whose method is named update? Call that method, check its policy. If it's a deny, boom, back to the 403, same thing as before. So you see where it's getting a little magical, because I'm calling a method that may or may not exist. If the method doesn't exist, then the policy doesn't exist, so you're getting a pass. That's true. But if the method exists, then it follows what the output of that method is to continue with its processing.
Do you have any possibility of collision there?
Only if you assign two policies to the same model and they have the same method names in them.
Okay.
And did you write a policy, like, so if you did not define update, it would pass?
Right, because no policy is literally, I have no policy on this. The power in this is that you can have all of your models using the same basic concepts. You know, if I were to pass in a different model here, users, if they're, you know, updating a user account, is this person allowed to update users? I don't have to check for what my route is to my policy name every single time. It's just RESTful style. So it gets even more magical than that. So in every controller, if you're extending your base controller, well, you're getting the authorizes requests trait. That authorizes requests trait means you can just call a helper function that's built into all your controllers. This, authorize, the name of what you're trying to do, and the model. Since we're passing in the model, then the name is the non-specific name. It's just the method of the policy, right? And this helper method of your controller will throw an HTTP exception that results in a 403 error. So you no longer have to have your if statement. It's just a single line. If you've got this single line in the beginning of your method, and they don't match the policy that you're requesting, boom, out the door, 403. Really cleans up the code. it's really nice because you can nest this. If you have one of your update post rules is, well, if they're updating a post of type YouTube video, then verify that they have permission for YouTube videos. Call a different method. Does that method have its own policy, its own model, its own? So this is not just for requests. This is, you can apply these authorized calls anywhere you want to in your system. If you want to catch the exception here that's being thrown, go ahead and catch it, throw them a custom 403 page, redirect them back to a request permissions page, do whatever it is you want to with it. Magic reflected controller authorization. So this is where all of the components come together to make the simplest one line. Doesn't make sense unless you saw the rest of the slides that I showed. I could just show you this next picture, but if you start there, it's completely meaningless because you don't know where all the information is coming from. Because it looks like this. This is your controller. This is your update method. This authorized post. If you pass, update it. This authorized post, same exact line. Destroy. Okay, this is using the PHP reflection class, where an object can say, sure, I know who I am, but what method called me? Well, in this case, unlike my previous examples, I was saying update post. In this case, I'm calling update. If my policy class has an update method, then it will assume that that's what I'm trying to do, because I'm passing a model directly into the authorized helper here. So I'm saying, I've got a model, I'm a function, so can he do this? And the authorize method here says, well, what function are you? He calls reflected. So what function are you? What user are you? Is there an attached policy to the model you're passing in? And then does the work and returns either a 403 or returns true and continues. Totally magic. But only because you've created your policy file, you've attached it to your model, you've done the legwork of making sure that your things make sense. I believe that's it, yeah. There are libraries coming out soon which are going to do a lot of maintenance and management for you. Users as members of groups having policies of their own, database connectivity. Like I said, you can query the database and say, is this person who is in this group allowed to access this function of the system? But really, when it comes down to it, you should be doing it like this. There is the really long way of doing it, through this. Imagine doing that on every single method that you want to have a policy. It's just a pain in the butt. Doing your own policy objects is really simple. Hey, this is what you get when you say artisan make policy. Add a new method. The method compares two values, right? That's the update method. You attach it in the policy auth service provider. It doesn't get much simpler than that. As much as it seems like a pain to do this series of steps to make your methods a little bit cleaner, it centralizes all of your policy work. It makes sure that everything is always pulling the same policy, that you're not misspelling blog as blurred, and that your rules get adhered to across the system. If I'm attaching my policy to a post model, and I'm always calling that policy check, then even in places like the API where I'm using different methods to update my policy model, still following the same rules. Don't have to duplicate code anywhere, which is one of our biggest goals. Do you? I think it can also use the policy model inference, which is why it's not in that example.
It's easy. A lot of times,
Yeah. There's actually a way to say this user is a super admin. So if you take the user model that's logged in and give it super admin, just call the super admin method, then policy checks go out the window. No more policy checks, just skips them.
Okay, let's say you don't need that super around everything, but yeah, like below down right. Yeah, you either have access to just to one specific posting job, you can access all of those.
Sure. Yeah, in my case here, my policy is just a single liner, but I could say, I have the user model here, I could say if the user is super user, then allow them to edit others, a pass true for all other users. Else, check that they're owner.
Right. Just think of this as maybe it's doing a check to see if the user belongs to a group, and you have a group table, and so the pass.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that this is deceptively simple. This is a policy system that just makes sure that the creator can edit. The reason I didn't use can a person create a record is because that's 10 times more complicated. Because there's no record to compare against. So creating a record from scratch, you have to have a source of something granting permission. That's where you have to have a call to the database, or verify the domain name of their email address, or gender, whatever you want to do, but it gets complicated. And Windows Server and Novell Server are policy systems. That's technically the thing they do. All the IIS and all that stuff that's attached on there is just extra as part of the software, but its core functionality is policies. So policies are a big deal. They're very difficult to handle in larger scales. So hopefully libraries will be out soon that do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. But yeah, it goes from this one-liner to crazy pretty quickly. So that there is that caveat. It's a deep well to jump into.
Have you is this used in
Nope.
other events?
Events.
So for example,
Saving, creating.
yeah, exactly.
With the way that events flow in Eloquent, you very easily could. You could definitely throw false if authorization fails. I wouldn't, because interrupting events as part of the Eloquent model throws you into a sort of a scary area. And in these cases where we're checking if someone has permission to, that's sort of already too late. That's a last case. Right. What we should be checking, except in the case of APIs where there's nothing to stop them. But for standard HTTP front ends, you just don't show them the button to that page.
Sure.
But yeah, you could easily hook to the event for creating, saving, updating, and
But I guess what I'm saying is, even through an API, you get your route hits a controller, the first thing you do is throw in a policy. And if they fail on a policy, it's not even continued. It's much like the form request authorization, dude. Seriously, why have you been doing this? Much like the form request authorization, where we've done a presentation on that before, where if it fails validation, it never drops into the controller at all.
right.
Your policy would be your first line in your controller. If it fails, it just never goes any deeper in the controller. So it never gets to your green or your save or anything.
Yeah, that's a sort of a matter of personal policy, and if you want to have that line in every controller, or if you just want to go the more RESTful route, like small controllers, you would want to throw it on the event.
Controller, but every method that would have a save, right? It would just
But you wouldn't have to do that if you were looking at the event stack.
So my concern is that the controller may be accessing a model that has a relation that, but the developer doesn't really understand that there's some scope and permission issue on this third-degree relation.
Absolutely.
I want to be able to say, absolutely, this bit of code is going to be applied regardless of how you access, where you access. And I can do that by using an event model as opposed to a controller with different sort of that third-degree relation permission issue.
Yeah, and if I were doing small controllers or an API-based system, I would definitely put it in an event handler.
I was about to say, why not?
Sure.
Yeah, these are super lightweight too. I was concerned about how the reflection in the last example is going to affect performance, and it's just not an issue. Reflection is a core component of the language, and using it is minimal impact on performance.
I wonder if you can actually call it the reflection method though, because the controller already has a method. It already knows what method is being called because of routing. So I wonder if it's referring to the route object or not.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the trait to see if that's actually what it's doing. It would make sense to not.
If they've already gone through reflection once at that point,
Yeah.
it makes sense just to reuse that same value.
Well, if they're reusing the value, then they're calling a reflection that's already been called. But yeah, it's like I said, magic. One of the things I don't like about it is that it is using magic. The thing I do like about it is that magic makes things faster and easier.
So did you do like some sort of benchmark test stuff for reflection stuff?
I looked up benchmarks for reflection.
You really know a big difference?
In iterations of 100,000, it was negligible.
Yeah.
Plus minus 1%. So, any questions? Any more questions? Yes.
Or just in general, why isn't this like Laravel 5.2 since it's like a new feature? Why isn't it 5.1 out of the bug fix?
Yeah.
Well,
Channel the voice of Taylor.
so 5.1 is LTS. Maybe they just wanted to be part of LTS. I don't know.
It's not bad.
That's not part of LTS. This is not part of LTS.
This is not part of LTS?
I don't believe so. I think.
I think you're wrong.
I'm not sure I did know Taylor has said that if it's not going to bring any kind of backwards compatibility, he has no problem introducing new features. So this is a feature that would bring backwards compatibility. If it was a feature that was major refactoring how Eloquent calls things, then this is just included in the trait.
Yeah. And this is correctly following Semver, which is that it's got it has no impact on existing code, and it's considered a minor feature since it's not a full system like Spark is. Then 5.1.11 is an okay thing to do.
I guess sometimes you can read the 5.1 documentation, you don't realize, oh, I need version 11
Yeah.
to get that feature. Hours before you realize.
It's yeah. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about his naming and numbering schemas. I am not one of those people. I do not hold any opinion left or right about it.
Give me magic.
Yep. Yes.
Did you see any downsides to using this compared to something like Sentinel? Or I don't know if you want to make your own seal or.
I haven't used Sentinel. I've used Sentry. But I'll tell you that Sentinel does not tie into the auth service provider the same way that this does. It's not by default tied into the controllers. It does cost money.
Sentinel's free.
Sentinel?
Yeah.
That's Sentry. That's the new version of Sentry.
Newer version of it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Laravel 5 version.
So that and what Sentinel is doing isn't permissions. It's advanced authorization with password reset and some mailer stuff added into it, and it's a new feature set for authentication, but it doesn't handle authorization. So it doesn't have that rule set of if true or false, dump the system. I mean, you could roll your own, but the same rule with encryption is the worst encryption is the one you write. And for security, I follow the open source coda, which is the more people are aware of it and using it, the safer it is because it's got more eyes on it, as long as you're updating your stuff. And with LTS, we get updates.
But you saw any downsides to the new.
I didn't see downsides except that if you're going to implement authorization, don't take it with a grain of salt. Really think about what you're getting into. Authorization is a total pain in the ass. And the rules that you see here are simple rules, but it is not a minor undertaking.
And that's regardless of the framework or whatever you use.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the reason Novell exists is to do just this. You know, Novell started off as a directory structure for managing permissions. Printer support, file system support, that stuff got added in. You know, but whole companies exist just to do authorization systems. It's not a small undertaking.
I did hear that somebody is planning on working on a, I don't know what the right word is, a system that ties this in with whatever.
Yeah. There are a couple systems that are currently, you know, in alpha. This is a really new feature. This is a month and a half, 2 months old. There are libraries that are being written. You'll see them on packages
That
soon.
must be a matter of leveraging an LDAP plugin, right?
Yeah.
Is that a secret? I would think.
Well, no, there's no secret, but taking that and turning it into something that is bonusing quality.
What would be cool is if you could manage the policies in that. That would be neat.
That's exactly what they're trying to do.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right, yeah, that would be cool, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but then, you know what the biggest LDAP systems are? Windows and Novell. So, you know, you start getting into ASP pretty quick there.
This reminds me of, I have some experience with a product called SiteMinder, and this is exactly what SiteMinder did. It's just it tied to LDAP, allows you to write policies for web applications. And listening to you talk through this just reminded me of my days of configuring SiteMinder.
Yeah. The key to this system is going to be integration with the database, looking up the logged in user, checking their permissions against a matrix table of their permissions allowed, and doing that kind of verification. That implementation is up to you. My guess is that we're going to see very soon a real simple group management or user management system that's going to check for all your models, check for existing methods, and generate an interface for you. That's not a hard thing to do.
Somebody write a plugin to, and again, speaking of experience with SiteMinder, we end up in these scenarios where users would or wouldn't have access to something. We couldn't figure out why. And there was an actually interface where you could drop them in and it showed how that user applied to each policy associated to a resource. I mean, that's when you start making a lot of policies, and especially making very complex policies, you'll find yourself where it's like, oh, you know, if something has access to something that they're not supposed to have access, why do they have access to it? And you've got to go through your policy to figure out which one's firing and have access.
Yeah. And that's actually, Novell has a software patent on that, which is showing what permissions this user has, which is why you don't see that in Windows. In Windows, you have to say, I want to know this permission if they have this permission. In Novell, you can say, give me all the permissions this user has. Watch the whole thing flow down. So
So this doesn't actually, so like you said, this doesn't actually deal with the underlying permissions itself. Like you want to have a permissions table and roles, and that's
yeah. Yeah, this isn't doing that, but there will be a package. Yeah, there will be a package soon that'll say store a database in MySQL, create the user records, have a column for each permission type. Is it Boolean, true or false, whatever. I'm sure Sentry is going to tie into this Sentinel. Yeah, I'm sure Sentinel is going to jump on this really fast because their system's sort of been waiting